this team continues to not define clear roles for people. I'm going to ask Tom Housenick about it in a minute because Spencer Howard this week had an amazing.
Yeah, well, hold on. Save your powder on that one.
We'll get to, but
Yeah,
I
but here's the problem. What I thought when they brought in Joe Girardi was to go a step back in time to work the way that you just described, which was to go the old-fashioned everybody has a role and to get away from Kapler baseball, which was all this goofy nonsense that was going to be all analytics. And he doesn't seem to be following the formula that you and I would like him to follow.
I'd like any consistent formula. Some nights they go to the bullpen early when the pitcher seems like they're pitching well. Some nights they leave the starter in when it looks like they're starting to tire. I just don't.
Well, why don't you ask somebody who actually knows more than we do?
Well, we made sure to find somebody who knows what they're talking about with baseball more than me and you, Jeff. Tom Housenick, thank you so much for joining us. Morning call. Jeff just told us about how he hit his 29th stadium around the country. I'm still interested what's going on with the Phillies. Can you explain to me what I'm seeing on the field these days?
I guess we're seeing a rinse and repeat of what we've watched the last 3-4 years. It's just some of the names are changed, and you feel for Rhys Hoskins, but this is a organizational wide problem that is not getting fixed. You would think that Dave Dombrowski's moves a couple of days ago are a step in that right direction, but Phillies fans want it now. They want it yesterday. It hasn't happened. They've been waiting for this whole decade, and it looks like we're looking at another September disappointment.
So you mentioned Dave Dombrowski's moves. For our listeners, Brian Minitti and Scott Profrock are no longer assistant general managers. They'll be consultants. They had come on under previous regimes with Andy McPhail and Matt Klentak. And Josh Bonifay, who the team made a big deal about how they were going to change the approach of the organization with hitting. And he came from a place that had a good reputation. He'd been with the team since October 2018. He's been offered a job as a professional scout, but won't be back. Can you talk about the significance of those changes from an organizational standpoint going forward?
I think that Dombrowski, again, we had to give him some time to kind of evaluate the entirety of what he was taking on. And I think it was clear to everybody who's been here watching this for several years that the minor league system was not getting better. And in fact, it has gotten worse. I mean, you're ranked 27th or 28th, depending on who you read, out of 30 teams, your minor league system. And that's just, you wonder how that can be. It hasn't, it's not like that they were once 1 or 2 and now all of a sudden they're just having a bad stretch. I mean, this has been going on for a while. We're watching number 1 picks seemingly top out at AA or AAA. And that just can't happen repeatedly. You look at the organizations that win, and they don't swing and miss at so many draft picks. And the Klentak Kapler era probably pushed back this movement 2 or 3 years. And again, they were desperate to try something that didn't work. I think Dombrowski's moves are encouraging moving forward, but again, it does nothing for the rest of 2021. But I don't think he went. And who's to say he's done? But I think he needs to go farther. There's some people in the organization who still have jobs that they were deemed not right for the positions they were in, but they just moved them somewhere else. And the Phillies clearly have a hard time just saying goodbye. And I think that might need to be done with a whole bunch of people, and instead of just reorganizing, because ultimately those people still have jobs and they still have a voice. So if their voice wasn't right, 2, 3, 5 years ago, why, even though the title is different, why is it still right now? And, you have to look at a lot more than just those 3 names, and, to lay those 3 out, it's more than that. But it's a big start because, Bonifay was supposed to be the guy to change things, and that has not happened. The pandemic didn't help anybody, but that can't be an excuse. We're looking at a system now where I'm watching in AAA, I'm watching guys get called up from low A ball all the way to AAA to fill roster spots, guys who have, who are barely out of college, guys who have never hit above 200 professionally are getting promoted 2 levels because they don't have guys that they can put on a AAA roster. And I'm watching other teams come in to Coca-Cola Park, other organizations, and that's not their problem. We've seen the Scranton Wilkesboro Rail Riders, 40 games now, maybe, if you include the alt-site games. And they've got an abundance of guys there at their beck and call at all times at AAA because they're going to get, the Yankees are going to use you and they're going to need you. And we've seen their injury situation throughout the season to know that they've had to dig deep into their system and look where they're at and look where the Phillies are going. It's just,
Tom,
it's very frustrating.
Tom, when you deal with the farm system, you talk about 2 components. One is talent evaluation and scouting, and the second is development. We've now heard from Spencer Howard on the latter part of that. He certainly has the talent and has complained about the player development. We've seen kind of the same thing when it came to what they did with Scott Kingery. Is the problem, I'm sure it's both, but of the 2, what would be the one that you would want to fix first? Is it the talent? Is it that there's no talent in the farm system right now? Or is it they're not developing it properly?
I think the longer problem has been the development. When I first watched Scott Kingery play, I had no doubt in my mind that he had the capability, and this wasn't a stretch, to play 10 years of Gold Glove baseball at second base in the major leagues without question. And then things changed, and it wasn't Scott that changed. It's not fair to put that on the player that, either he stopped working hard or he tried to be a home run guy. I mean, that was the last thing he thought he was and the last thing he wanted to be. He liked hitting the ball and running, and he loved playing second base, and he was the best in the entire system the Phillies have had in a long time at that position defensively. And now look where he's at. You look at, Rhys Hoskins for a while, what they tried to do to him. Spencer Howard, the first time I saw him in Double-A, there was no question in my mind. He was a major league number 3 guy for a long time. And you can put a lot on, the shoulder issues, but it's much deeper than that. I hope he gets it straightened out. Texas is a tough place to be a pitcher, but the kid has the stuff. I just hope that it works out for him. But you look at a guy like Cole Irvin. He was never in their plans because he didn't fit the developmental model that the Phillies have, and yet he's doing just fine out in Oakland. Now again, different ballpark, but bottom line is he's facing American League lineups day in and day out, and he's given 6 innings a night. And that's the kind of guy he is. He's a grinder, a 3-4 guy that the Phillies are starving for now because they don't have anybody to fill these spots when Zach Eflin goes down or their 4 and 5 guys don't work out. So you're looking to see these guys move on into other organizations before they've, beyond the point of being fixed. And Cole Irvin obviously wasn't at that point. He had his 1 or 2 shots and that was it. And now look at him. He's in a perfect spot. And again, maybe that's a better spot, period. But I knew that Cole Irvin was a major league pitcher. The Phillies, I don't think the Phillies really believe that, and the way they used him is proof that they didn't believe it. So I think there's a lot to be said for the developmental side that has to be completely changed. And I'm just, again, that takes a lot and more beyond just the 3 moves that they announced earlier this week for sure.
Look, you're talking to 2 members of the Cole Irvin fan club. We enjoyed getting to talk to him many times when we would come out and visit you guys at the ballpark there. And he clearly was never a part of their plans. You mentioned Scott Kingery and him kind of being yo-yoed around, trying to save him before it's too far. I'll ask you about their latest name, Alec Boehm, who, if we're being honest, there were questions about Alec Boehm when he was drafted. Questions about whether he could be a major league third baseman, not about his hitting, which seems to have no plan at the plate now and is very losing his own confidence up there. But his defense is clearly a problem for a team that has bad defense. And now he's back down trying to figure out his swing. What are you seeing out of him and what do you expect?
Yeah, he's one who, clearly, like you said, there was a clear evaluation of him that said defense is going to be a problem no matter what. And, the ballpark this week, again, it doesn't say it didn't happen, but he's not out there at 2:00 taking extra grounders at third base. That doesn't mean it's not happening and there's not work being done outside of the eyes of us watching on the field. But that's where I think when things, you're going bad as a hitter, everybody goes through that stretch, and it was, they kind of left him up there. They weren't yo-yoing him like Mickey Moniak or some other guys. They left him up there to just kind of work through those slumps offensively. But when the defense went, I got to think that he's thinking, in his mind as a young guy, he's got pride. Now I'm not a value with my glove or my bat. So they both kind of just, knock you around mentally, and you're thinking, okay, what can I do for these guys? And you start pressing, and it just gets worse. But he already was below average defensively, and then you boot a couple of balls, you throw a couple away. Next thing you know, you can't get out of your own head. And they're to the point now where he should be just ground ball after ground ball after ground ball. And if you don't think that he's going to make it as a third baseman, then those ground balls got to come at first base, because those are your options. He's not athletic enough to play a corner outfield spot. So you have first or third, or before he's completely in a situation where Scott Kingery is, you try and move him and get something for him, because what he needs to do right now is to be of value at some point, at some aspect of the game. And right now he's struggling. Now, the first inning of the first game in AAA this week, he made this really nice over-the-shoulder catch, and everybody was like, "Wow, he's having defensive problems." But it's the problems with the routine plays. If you're not making the routine plays, making a spectacular one every once in a while is not going to cut it at any level. So that's where his problem is at. And again, he's not very athletic. And again, who knows how we would all be if we were, 6'5" and 210 pounds, wherever he is. I mean, it's not the easiest thing to do, but they've got to figure out what they've got real fast with him. They were in a situation where they had to put him up there. And that's part of the problem, is that as soon as somebody shows any semblance of life, look at the Luke Williams situation this year. Anybody who has any hot streak in them, chances are you're going to get a shot real quick up there. Nick Maton got thrown into a situation, but it's, this is going to happen with all guys. After you get a hot streak to start your career, you're going to figure you out a little bit. There's going to be a book on you, and you're going to have a slump. And so what's Maton been doing since the slump? Yo-yoing back and forth. So what's going to happen with him in the future? Now, he seems like he's kind of a kid that's kind of oblivious to that and can handle that mentally, but that with some other names in the past, that hasn't been the case, and they've got nothing. So the big fear with Bohm is that's what's going to happen with him, is that he's not going to figure it out defensively, and then they're going to yo-yo him up and down every time he gets hot in AAA. They're going to call him up, or an injury, and they're going to need to call him up, and before you know it, it's 2 or 3 years down the road, and they're like, well, remember what happened in 2020, or whatever with these guys. So they've been in a catch-22 situation with a lot of promising guys. They only have so many of them in the system now, which makes those misses magnified tremendously. And they're in a win now mode with those 4 main guys in Nola and Wheeler and Harper and Realmuto, and that's why they can't wait per se and save money with who they have around them, because those 4 guys are right there in their prime now. They've got to win now, and they're stuck because the system can't support the rest of those positions they need. So it's not looking real good. Again, stranger things have happened in September. Who knows? They could get hot, and the Braves could realize, hey, we don't have Acuna, or hey, we're in a pennant race and we don't belong here. But that's not the Braves' MO historically, so I wouldn't count on that either.
Well, you also have another problem, which is Rhys Hoskins comes back for a game and now is done for the season. Do you think that the Phillies brought him back too quickly because of the panic that they were not doing well over the last week? Or was he ready? And now the second question I have for you is, are they now going to drag Alec Bohm back up before he's not ready because Hoskins is gone for the season?
Well, that's the fear, is that he's won for his first 11 in AAA, Bohm is, and he hasn't really had a lot of ground ball work to be tested at third base. So, there's nothing showing you, hey, he's got something figured out, or he's got his head back together if it was ever a problem or whatever. So that's what's going to happen. They're going to need him before he is ready to go back there. So that's a fear that we've watched, play over and over again. This is like Hollywood just cranking out the same sequel, year after year with certain movies. It's just, you've seen this before. It doesn't work. You're not going to catch, lightning in a bottle with a guy who doesn't hit at all at AAA, and he's going to magically find everything at the majors. That's just not how it works. But I don't think, I think the Phillies trusted the medical staff, and they trusted Reese telling him what he was feeling. And, knowing Reese, he doesn't want to, hey, let's play this conservatively, knowing that his value and his pride, that he wants to be out there. And, who's to say if they waited 2 weeks and put him out there, that the same thing wouldn't have happened based on what the injury is. So they, in the minds of some, they might have just said, hey, look, he can either be fine today or he could be done the first time he goes on the field. Today, tomorrow, next week, next month. We don't know. So, you don't know for sure, but I don't think that they would panic to the point where they would pressure or force a player to want to go out there if they knew they were hurt. And, Zach Eflin's a similar kind of guy. He's got a lot of pride, and, he's in a position with the organization now because he spoke up a couple of years ago when they were trying to sell him some nonsense about how he should be pitching. And nobody knows Zach Eflin better than himself, and he stood up for himself. So I think here's a guy he knew he wasn't ready to go pitch in a major league game after just one brief rehab start. I mean, they're so desperate that they need help, and I think Eflin sounded the alarm like, hey, I'm not going to ruin my career, knowing he's had all kinds of leg problems previously. I'm not going to ruin my career just because the Phillies need me. And again, not to say the Phillies approached him on that, but Zach knows better. And I just think Reese was probably in a thought process like, hey, this is like a hamstring that lingers or an oblique that lingers. Those kinds of things are not just going to go away magically. And the only way to find out is let's just go play and see what happens. And if he tried that, if he sat until the middle of September and tried it, it probably would have been the same result that night. Something would have triggered it, and gone he would have been. So again, they're stuck. They're short. They're not going to go out. There's nobody to go get in the system that's going to fix what the problems they have. What they have is Bohm and Maton, Moniak, and it's just those guys have been called. Those last two have been called up repeatedly, hardly played, and then gone back down. So there's been no development there.
Well, let's hope, Tom, that the changes in the organization start to give you a little bit of a better product on the field out there to watch. Always appreciate you hopping on, even if it's not the most fun talking about how they're all playing. But we really appreciate your take. Got to look out for your work in the morning call. And thanks for giving us a few minutes to talk it all through.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Have a good one.